Anyways, I'm an alcoholic. My name's Andrew. Said that already. Where did my story start? I told it a few times and I think I'd remember. My father, my biological father, was an alcoholic. I don't know a lot about him. He passed away when I was about 1.5 years old. I know he wasn't, from what I've heard from people, he wasn't the nicest person. I'm guessing he had some depression problems. That seems to run in the family. I don't know much about medical history on that side as I'm I'm not sure. Some aunts and uncles in Holland who were quite long-lived apparently, so that's good. I know that he was allergic to bullets because he shot himself and it killed him. That's a pretty severe reaction. So I'm going to stick with the not trying that. And it's, like a nut allergy. You got it, just don't tempt fate. So yeah, he was probably wasn't a happy person. And I can relate to that now. I used to, when I was a kid, I'd make up stories in my head as to how somebody could possibly not heal. Well, he must have been a cop. He must have drawn his gun the wrong way or something. Just didn't register with me. Grew up in this neighborhood, went to this church. I had a really good childhood mom, remarried when I was about 5 years old, and I've called that man Dad for my entire life. I can remember. We lived directly across the street from here for a little while. This is some of my earliest memories, and then we moved just down the street over there. It's a huge move. I would imagine the logistics of moving that short a distance are worse than going, to another town, because at least you can rent a truck for that. So yeah, it was a good neighborhood to grow up in. There were lots of kids around when I was a kid. The neighborhood got together on a fairly regular basis. There were a lot of fire pits in the backyards and horseshoe pits in some of them, and the adults would have a few drinks and whatever, and I always saw that, and they were all having fun. And as I got a little bit older, and my sister, I have an older sister, they used to think it was hilarious that my sister at 13 years old could chug a beer and belch like a grown man. They used to slip me a little something every now and then just to see if I'd make a face. So I learned in a real hurry, don't make a face, and they'll give you something stronger. Never a ton. In my early teen years, every once in a while, Mom would say, "Hey, you can have a cooler." They were delicious. It's like, why on earth do they make something that tastes like a Kool-Aid and makes you tipsy? Like, I totally understand why now, but so yeah, it was fun. I didn't maybe 12 or so, 12 or 13, that I realized that I was home alone in the summertime. I had some friends in the neighborhood, and my parents had a really well-stocked liquor cabinet, and I really liked the taste of cherry whiskey. Never got caught, but we sampled different things in the cabinet but never really, did that one summer a couple of times, and then nothing really till high school. The first time I actually got drunk, that should have just been a warning sign and a half, but I really nobody had explained anything. No, I knew nothing about alcoholism at that point in my life. We talked to a girl that I knew. She was dating a guy who was old enough to get served. I was 16 years old, and so he went to the beer store and the liquor store for me, and we went to a party, and the next morning I was severely hungover. Mom was super pissed, wanted to know where I was, were the parents there, blah, blah. Dad thought it was hilarious. Stomping around the house, "How are you feeling? Can I get you some bacon?" Trying to make me throw up, and knew my head was pounding. He let me go back to bed And I slept that off, and a little later in the afternoon, he sat me down. All right, what were you drinking? I said, beer and lemon gin. Okay, first mistake. You pick one thing, you stick with it. 2, guys buy gin, but they don't drink it. That's panty remover. And that was my drinking story and my sex talk, all rolled into one. It never came up again. That was it. So, yeah, and from that point on, I didn't, every time I went to a party where there was alcohol, for the most part, I did drink. Probably if I talked to some of my friends from high school now, they would say, oh yeah, no, we knew you had a problem. Because every time I drank, I got fairly drunk. I didn't really black out. I usually remembered most of what went on all night. Quite often, at some point, the next day they could play a game of where did Andrew throw up. It was somewhere. There was no pattern to it really, just that every time that I drank a lot. In high school, started dating. First girl I dated, I was, all right, this is it. It's the rest of my life all planned out right now. We're gonna end up married, this is blah, 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 blah. 3 months in, I realized that she didn't have quite the same idea behind it. And I kind of turned inward, like a lot inward. Just lost my appetite, stopped eating. I was almost as tall as I am now, but I dropped down to about 140 pounds. I had no idea what depression was, none whatsoever. But that, I'm gonna guess, was my first episode. All kids are a little moody. I've got one that's 11 going on 17 right now. And yeah, it's happy, mad, sad some days. But that I wish in high school somebody had sat me down and explained what depression was, and ifs and buts. But maybe I could have made some changes in my life back then. Talked to somebody that would have made life a little easier at that time. I pulled through that and moved on. My life became regular teenager again. Bought a car, all this and that. Still, I had a complete liquor cabinet in the back of my closet, but I only drank when I went to parties. It didn't occur to me to just have a drink by myself. That just seemed weird. Went out with friends, we went out for supper or something once we were old enough, have a beer or whatever. But yeah, I still really only drank at parties and social, and it wasn't very social because for the most part I probably made absolutely no sense to anyone. Apparently I was funny, but not funny haha, but funny. So I started dating my wife, I think I was 21 or so, started trying to find my way in life. I got the high school sampler. I didn't really focus in any one direction. I got all my shop classes, except for electrical shop. That looked really boring, so I'm an electrician now. And all my art classes, because I thought maybe being a graphic designer would be fun. Turns out it's a ton of work, so let's dodge that one. And through my 20s, drank at parties. Would drink when I got home from work sometimes, but not really a lot, didn't think. I do remember showing up, my second term of trade school, showing up my first day, Monday morning, severely hungover. Didn't think that was odd. you know, just a little anxious about going back to school, so I had a few drinks before I went to bed. A lot of few drinks, but whatever. I still didn't feel like I had any sort of problem at all. At one point in my life, in my early 20s, somebody introduced me to pot. This stuff's great. I don't drink at all when I'm on this. Mom had said to me a few times, you know, maybe you ought to watch your drinking. You know, there is a bit of a family history for you there. I'm my own man. I got this. I got this handled. Like, there's no way that that's going to be me. And I think I said that to her in more words, maybe a little bit kinder and gentler, because as she always used to say, I can still kick your ass. I might have to stand on a chair to do it, but I can still kick your ass. Yeah, so for about a year, I didn't drink all that much. See, I don't have to drink. I smoke pot every day. I didn't have to drink, and then I finally decided that wasn't that great, because I hated the foggy feeling every morning. You know, it wasn't a hangover, but didn't like trying to think in the mornings. So I stopped that, and I still would cycle up and down. I made an appointment with my doctor 3 or 4 times to go in because I just didn't feel right. But I always canceled it. How does, you know, I was in my 20s, so I'm a grown man. How does a grown man go into his doctor and say, hey, I feel kind of sad. I don't feel right. So I always canceled the appointment. And the funny thing is I usually canceled the appointment when I was at the absolute bottom of the low, which just makes no sense whatsoever. But I did, and I just continued on like that. You know, my wife and I dated for, I want to say, 9 years before we got married. Maybe 8. We got married when I was 29, and on our first anniversary, we had a newborn at home, 2 weeks old. We wanted to start our family quickly because a lot of our friends had kids, and we had been talking about it for years before we got married. You know, a dog just wasn't going to do it. So, and from what I've talked to my wife, about 2 weeks after, or the week after he was born, I took some time off work. I went into work and quit my job. I had another one, but I gotta say, that was the most irresponsible feeling ever, leaving my new wife and our new son in the house we just bought to go quit my job. That felt strange. Moved into the job that I'm in now. I was a little faster paced. Christy said that the first summer that we had Owen, the first year of his life, she was like a single mom. So I worked like 7 days a week. And so that's kind of when I started picking up my drinking. You know, it wasn't, I didn't see any pattern at all. She did right away. She'd mention it, but she didn't really didn't push. But I would have a couple of beers every day when I got home. I brought home a motorcycle that a friend of mine gave me. It was, you know, in half decent shape, so I took it apart, put it all back together again in the garage to get it working. While I can't work on a project in the garage without having a beer on the go. And instinctually, I always had more than one case of empties in the garage, so I could shuffle them around. So it was really, it was like a shell game. You know, oh, this one's got a few full and this one's got a few empty. It was really hard for anyone else to count how much I had actually drank. But I think when she came out into the garage from time to time and she saw, you know, a bottle sitting next to me that was that full, that full, that full, that full, that full, that full, she could put like 2 and 2 together. She mentioned it a few times, and I just got annoyed. everyone I know drinks like this, right? It turns out, looking around at a lot of the people I work with, there are probably more than a few of them that could stand to maybe, visit a meeting. But it's attraction, not promotion. I'm not going to go shove it down their throats. Generally speaking, if somebody walks up to you and says, "You need AA," probably they're going to say, "No, I don't," and walk away. I've talked to a few guys I work with, and if we get into a conversation with somebody I know, I let them know, yeah, I go to AA meetings. I continued. We had another son. When he did get that dog, he was a great Dane. He was great. I always have trouble putting together the timeline on all this because things went a little blurry in my mid-30s. Go figure. Kept on working, the pace kept up. I hopped into a service truck because I was pretty good at troubleshooting machines and that, and service and jobs weren't mutually exclusive, and they weren't willing to pay me a full wage just to show up only when something broke. So the size of the jobs they wanted to be run and got bigger and bigger, and always had a knot in my stomach. Always. When I was, had a few people working for me. The first time it was kind of fun, but, it's just opening day jitters. And nothing to think about. Go home, have a couple of drinks, and you'll relax. And the longer that went on, the more I realized I hated running jobs. And I always figured I'd just get used to it. I never did. And I would drink more and more. Got to the point where, if I got off work early, I was so happy because I could get to the liquor store before Christy got home. I didn't have to sneak it in the house, and I knew I didn't have a problem because I bought the same amount every day. I knew exactly how much I drank. This is the amount I can handle. 2 tall boys and a Mickey. Yeah, that's normal. I'm a fairly big guy, but. I got to a point where I would get home from work and crack a beer, have a sip, and then chug a Mickey just as fast as I could, just to get it into me, so it would start to take effect, so that I wouldn't feel completely on edge and just like a stranger in my own skin. I had been to the doctor, and by that point, I talked to him about depression, and he put me on an antidepressant. It didn't work. This stuff doesn't work. So how much do you drink? Not that much. How much do you drink? In a week? I don't know, a couple of drinks. I drink a couple of days a week. Only the ones that end in Y. But never honest with my doctor. Never. That particular prescription didn't work for my depression, so he switched me to something else, and the something else ended up being evil, horrible. Oh my gosh. Again, probably would work much better for somebody that didn't have a constant blood alcohol level of some sort. But live and learn, I suppose. Luckily, I lived. My anxiety at work continued to get worse, and the jobs got bigger. And one morning, I drove to Plattsville to pick up the apprentice that was riding down to Hagersville with me, running a job, and I had, maybe 12 to 16 people working for me in this factory down there. I can't remember. That number always seems to grow. Hindsight is 20/20, but the imagination gets better and better. More people than I was comfortable with. And I said to him on the drive down, I think I'm going to call the boss and ask him if I can turn my van in. I don't want to do this anymore. He goes, well, you're doing a great job. I'm talking to a kid that's, just, he's a third-term apprentice, and he's, no, you're doing good, man. Keep it up. Keep up the good work. And we're getting a talk from the apprentice on the way into work in the morning. Like I'm a hype man, I guess. I continued on for another couple of days. I talked to my wife, and I said, I think I need to give this type of work up. I need to get out of this. And she said, no, just everyone I've talked to says you're good at your job. Just try and relax. And looking back on it now, if you have somebody that has, massive anxiety, telling them to not be anxious, like it's like, well, I mean, when Christy's angry at me it's for something, I tell her to calm down. It never works. Never. To be fair, it's likewise in reverse. So telling somebody who's very anxious about a situation that situation isn't worthy of being anxious about. Now, not only are they anxious about it, but they feel horribly inadequate for feeling anxious about it. Ended up, I called the project manager on the job and said, listen, I need out of this. He said, well, just hold on, we'll send you some help. They ended up sending a guy that I'd worked with before and hiring a couple more guys, which adding manpower did not help. I mean, yeah, there's more work getting done, but there's more people to supply material to, and have complaints about this guy doing this, and I don't work well with this person, blah, 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 blah. And finally ended up calling the head of our department, and I guess I must have sounded just right, because about an hour and a half later, he shows up on site with another person to drive my van home, and they drove me home. I don't remember much of that day, and it's not that I was severely hungover or anything. I was just in a complete spin. I do remember the place had a massive silo. It was what we were working on. I had to climb up this thing on a regular basis to try and plan out work, and I'm up there, and my head is just spinning, and all of a sudden this thought comes in: if you fell off the side of there, it would be an accident. Christy would get all the insurance money. This is really the best out for your family. So I came back down off the silo, because that didn't seem right. It's I really hope these are not thoughts that other people have, because it didn't feel great. Talking to somebody about it later on, they said, well, it's, he said your mind starts spinning and you're looking for a window, and it'll grab on to whatever's there, and just happening to be that I'm a depressive person, that happened to be the one it went for. Luckily the window still had bars on it, and I couldn't make it through. So back to the doctor I went. Didn't tell him all of that, didn't tell him how much I was drinking, but he said, you need to take a little bit of time off. I agree. So now I'm at home alone during the day with the liquor store in my backyard. What else am I going to do? All right, well, it opens at 10 o'clock. Saunter on over there. I almost made it till noon. That's close enough. This is like a brunch drink, really. It's like a mimosa, only more like a Manhattan without the vermouth. So that didn't make anything any better, but a little while later I got stir crazy being at home. I said, okay, I'm ready to go back to work. Picked up my van and went back to work. And I sat down and had a chat with my boss while I was off, and he said, listen, it's going to be up to you to police how much pressure you let everyone put you under. We're too big of a company. Everyone's got their own jobs and this and that, and everyone wants to get their jobs done. in the office, the next step down, it's going to be up to you. And so, yeah, sure, I understand. Well, I'm a people pleaser, I think. I try. And the job started ramping up again, and I had one that I was told, oh, there's just 4 little things you need to mount on there, and it ended up 2 days later that I had 5 days to strip and rewire this massive press that stamped out car parts. Not quite the whole side of a car, but it was large parts. So I ended up off work again, and I was off for a little while, and Christy could see how much I was drinking. She knew how much I was drinking. There was no hiding it. You can only hide so many bottles. Throw a couple in the recycling bin. Those are the red herrings. Well, the fact that there's a couple should probably be a so I ended up went back to work again, and a little while later I was back running a job again, and I went home that night and everything was just off. And I went upstairs and I went to my room, and Christy came upstairs to talk to me, and next thing I remember her saying is, either you get in the car and you come to the hospital with me, or I call 911 and all your buddies on the fire department come to the house and they load you into an ambulance. And the whole neighborhood sees all of that, and then you go to the hospital. So I went with her, relatively quietly. But they took us from the waiting room and emerged very quickly. From what I remember, again, because I hadn't had much to drink, but I was not inside my own head anymore. I ended up in the hospital for a while, in the wing where they locked the doors from the outside. Once I got out, I said to Christy, that's the longest 2 weeks of my life, and she said it should be. You were there for 3. Got out, and I'm realizing that I've rambled, so I'll try and wrap this up. Got out, figured everything would go back to normal. They had put me on a whole bunch of medications, and one of them said, do not take with alcohol. Well, I've had medication that said that before. Turns out not all of it means that you're going to get sleepy. Some of it means you go batshit crazy. Luckily, when that happened, I wasn't angry at anyone because the size I am now, but in, well, far better shape. And Chris came home and she confronted me about having a couple of drinks again. There was more than a couple, it's just what she found. And she went downstairs, and the next thing I remember is having a clothes hanger wrapped around my neck as tight as I could get it. Luckily, I was very, very clumsy as well. She got that off me, and that time she did call 911, and police showed up, and I got a handcuffed ambulance ride, and they didn't keep me in the hospital this time, but they took my license. So that whole blood work, Brad and I have talked about that. And was a while after that, and I stopped taking that medication, and I cut way back on my drinking, but I still drank. And one day we're driving, and I'm paraphrasing because Chris told me one day this is not what she said, but she just looked at me and she said, I don't understand why you don't get it. And it was September 28th, 2014. My last drink had been the day before, mid-afternoon, while I was raking leaves. There was nothing significant about the last drink I had. It wasn't a particularly bad drunk, but something about the way she said, I don't understand why you don't get it, is what rang true with me. And I had been coming to AA for a little while at that point, and if I actually took enough of those silver one-day tokens every time I should have taken one. I would have had I would have had to carry a Merce, European man bag, whatever you want to call it. But that's when it clicked, and I got a sponsor and started working with him. I still haven't made it all the way through the steps. I need to do about step 6, and I've stopped, but I have some people that I need to talk to, and that whole making amends thing is more difficult than it sounds, but every time I do, it gets better. Today, I can go out at night and Chris says have fun, not when will you be home. My kids don't look at me funny if I'm lying on the couch because they know I'm just taking a nap. If they walk over and poke me, it will scare the shit out of me and I will jump and they think it's hilarious, you know. But I will wake up. You know, I can be there for their events and not have to stay away from everyone else that's there. I mean, my kids were still quite young. The older one remembers me drinking beer, and he knows, you know, early on, he asked why I went to these meetings, and my wife told him, oh, we hope Daddy did not drink so much beer. Oh, that's good. You know, he understands that. I watch my kids very closely, though, when it comes to depression and other mental illness, because I'm not going to let that one slide for another generation. And I really hope that anyone else that feels that way, you know, they get the help they need instead of just trying to push through it, because it's not worth just pushing through it. There's no reward at the end for saying, well, I beat depression. I also beat myself up for years on end, but look at me, and, you know, I made it. You know, I think I covered the pertinent details. Much happier today than I had been for years on end before coming here. You know, being handcuffed and dragged to the hospital ended up being a really, really good thing for me. Generally speaking, handcuffs are horrible. Although I do remember Robert Downey Jr., I read a quote from him about why he doesn't drink anymore, and he says, well, I'm allergic to alcohol. Every time I drink, I break out in handcuffs. And yeah, you know what, that kind of makes sense. So Brad, congratulations again. Peter, congratulations. And I'm sorry I didn't catch your name there. Sean? Sean? Congratulations again.
Thank you for your story.
Yeah, just coming in is a big step, and if you stay, it gets better, for sure. Thank you.